there. Okay, so from now on, this meeting will be recorded, and the rest of what is the most important information you'll get sent home later. Okay. Yeah. A little sort of thing about who we are. So I'm speaking now. My name's Wendy Ward. I used to be called Van Winden before I got married. So just in case you need to search my credentials somewhere. I work for the Lely Centre in Devon and Cornwall doing farm management support, also called FMS, where we go onto the farms and help you out with both the software and the cow management. And so if there's any questions at any time, contact your FMS, because we're there for both farmers and for the nutritionists that are there, for vets and for anyone else who's involved to get the most out of the cows, really. From my background, I'm a farm veterinary surgeon, so that's where I'm coming from. So yeah, anything on health would be my thing. And I've been a veterinary surgeon for about 10 years before I joined Lely, which is about 5 years ago. So we've been doing this for a little while. And that's why I'm going to talk you through the actual foundations. Basically, for this DLM module, which we're all interested in, to work, it's obviously best to get everything right in the first place. The feed settings in T4C or Horizon, which is a new Lely software, which will start to be rolled out in May in the UK this year. Both work with are the basis for which the DLM module works. And the basics kind of is, okay, we need to get feed and water into the cows. And what do we get out? A bit of meat. And a lot of slurry. And of course, milk. And this is the main one sort of making us money. You could argue that this one gives you a little bit of money and that one is the investment in the future. How much milk you get out, and obviously also how much meat, might depend a bit on the genetics of the cow. But a big part of it is actually the quality of the feed. So what are we doing in dairy cows? We're feeding the rumen bugs. You know, these bugs that are in the rumen, they actually are the ones that digest or ferment the grass and the forage that the cows eat. You give them a bit of concentrate with them, which generally gives a lot of energy and a couple other bits. That's all for those bacteria or microbes in the rumen, who then make all the volatile fatty acids that will be turned into milk. A good start. So we're going to get for good forage. So the quality in the clamp, or even as you harvest it, because obviously someone here forgot a bit of tire. There was tires on top of the clamp, but this was definitely inside the clamp. What you get is a lot of sort of rotting around it. This is another way of storing brewers. Let me just think what it was. Anyway. It's all about the storage phase as well. So anything getting watery, this looks fairly tidy. That affects your whole feeding system, clearly. I'm going to turn this. And then it's about feeding out. So whether you got a vector mixer wagon, or you got your own mixer wagon, or even if you don't have a mixer wagon at all, it's the quality that you put in front of the cows. And if you mix it more, shorter or longer, that can make a difference on the chop length or the way it's mixed and the first bite the cows eat. So that's really important. Once it's in front of the fence, it's still not inside the cow realistically. So for example, little things can happen. Cows can have access to actually walk in the food. This is not uncommon. And with that sort of slurry-ish sort of foot generally, you get bacteria in the feed, and that can help the feed go off quicker. sometimes rain, well, pigeons here, but I believe there was actually more starlings there first, but they fly off quicker than pigeons do when you take a picture. So there's a lot of things that actually, even when you put really good food in front of the cows, it's still affected by other factors. And this is a quite sort of important one, really, for a lot of farms. Availability. How often do you feed up? The more often you feed up, the higher your intakes are. That's proven. The more you push up again, the higher your intakes are. Because even if you obviously not push up enough, we get systems like this where the cows need to reach far to get to the lovely food there is. That feed push obviously got a bit off the rails. If it does the job, it would look more like that. You can do that with your tractor or any other feed pusher as well. But the more you push, the more higher your intakes. Little other factors, mobility or any general illnesses that stop cows moving really. They're more painful, they're more likely to lie down and less likely to visit the feed fence for their feeds. Rumens are far stabler if cows have little and often feeding. Again, and that's where your pushing up helps. So if you push up 6 times a day, your cows tend to walk to the feed fence 6 times a day. If you push up 12 times a day, your cows tend to walk to the feed fence 12 times a day. And that makes a big difference to the rumen. The more often she visits, the more stable the rumen is, and the better her intakes and the better her yield efficiency from the feed is. And also not to forget the actual water quality. The biggest part of milk is actually water. And you basically get more milk when cows have clean trim troughs. So it's probably far overlooked, this one is. Now, it's not just the feed fence we're talking about today. Actually, we're talking more about the robots themselves. So the intake at the robots is guided by the milk visits. The robots are not an out-of-parlour feeder, so she only gets fed when she's milked. The general guidelines are a maximum of 3 kilos per milking. This is to safeguard, again, rumen health. Little and often of cake is the key here. You can set the robots to feed more cake, but you do risk getting a slug of cake in the cows, which upsets the rumen, or even is the eating time. A milking takes on average about 6 minutes. And that is about enough time for a cow to eat 3 kilos of cake. So if you want to give her 4 or 5 kilos in that same 6 minutes, you might find that a lot of cows won't be able to actually eat that. What farmers do then sometimes is put the priority feeding option on, which is a lovely option, but use it with care. Because what you end up with is that that cow milks for 6 minutes, but needs another 1 or 2 minutes to get her cake dispensed, which means she's actually in the box for 7 to 8 minutes. And 1.5 minutes, she's not producing milk. And if that happens a good couple of times a day, let's say 5 times a day, you actually could have had another cow doing a full milking in that same time. So you're really taking up robot time, and that is not efficient. If you want more milk in your tank, you want that robot to milk all the time it's got. So you end up with priority feeding, you could end up with a lower milk yield for a robot. And there's a bit of a question even if cows have already got a lot, well, the biggest part of their diet done for the day, they are less likely to move around and visit robots as well. It is a good setting when it's used for cows that really milk very fast, and you're not expecting them to, to feed that 4 kilos of cake. You go for the lower amounts of cake, and only for individual cows. This is a very important one, and we recently again found this out. Calibrate feeders. Whether it's been the year this year, but it seems that the cake has started to differ in weight. So every feed load you get, please calibrate the feeders, because you can end up feeding cows 0.5 kilo more or less in the day than you're actually thinking you're doing, and that can make a big difference. So for what you're actually doing on farm, and I'm sure you kind of know this, is when we decide to give cows a diet, we tend to look at the forage. What have we got, and what are you willing to buy in? With your feed advisor, you come on sort of a diet advice where you look at what have I got available and what do I want to achieve? How do I want to achieve this? So you end up with a diet advice based on more or less a paper calculation. This advice is then set into your software settings. In our case, the robots, how much cake to feed, and also, in your sort of feeder wagon settings, how much of a grab you feed and how it's fed out. That then results in a feed intake, and then you get the results of it. How much milk do I get out of it? And later on also the effects on health and fertility. Now you might be happy with that, so okay, we go on for a couple of months until obviously the forage changes, because that happens. Or you actually say, well, no, I want to improve because it's not quite what I expect, or I want to do better. So let's have a look at either the forage analysis again, or we go straight away and say, well, actually, we think the settings are not quite right, so we tweak them. And this is the circle that you keep then going round and round a couple of times through the year. So the key performance indicators, what you're looking for. So within a couple of days on the robots, you would see with a diet change, effect on robot visits in milkings and refusals. What tends to happen is if cows get less energy at the feed fence, they start looking for energy because they're sort of hungry. So they start looking for this robot more. So you tend to end up with more refusals mainly. And even if the cows were not having enough milkings, then you also get more milkings. The other way around, if you say, well, actually, I've got loads of milkings and I just need to put up my feed fence a bit, which we'll talk about later, then you might end up with a few less milkings and a few less refusals. It comes to the point like, I want this used efficiently. So what we tend to be looking at is, let's say about 10 kilos of milking you expect. So for 30 kilo herd, 3 milkings would be brilliant. And then about 1 to 1.5 refusals would be efficient traffic to the robots. And if there's any changes, well, after forage change, diet change, then it's all to just have a little chat with each other and say, is this good? Is this bad? Do we want to change anything to make it better? The same for other things, things like rumination change quite quickly. When you get a more fibrous diet, you get rumination going up. Eating minutes is a different thing than rumination. Rumination is more like the cows lying down chewing their cud. Eating minutes is really the cows tucking into the feeders, and that's actually the head being down eating. We tend to look at, because everybody asks me for targets, we tend to look at about 450 for rumination minutes a day and half of that should be eating minutes. So generally eating minutes are half of the rumination, and obviously there's a bit of a leeway, but this is a target you're looking for, what is normal. Other KPIs you'd be looking at, but they take a bit longer to filter through after a diet change. Milk yield, clearly, the most important one everybody looks at, but also your fat yield. Is your butter fat going up or down? Is your protein going up or down? Are you feeding fresh grass with high proteins in it? Or are you feeding lots of fibrous food, which would make the butter fats going up? And then also the activity of the cows. Now we've had the rumination and the eating minutes, but also you slowly on the longer term, if cows start feeling a bit sort of acidotic, they might get less active, because acidosis can, subclinical acidosis can cause laminitis, so a bit of tenderness on the feet. And the further term, obviously you will get any weight losses on the that the robot will register, and your fertility effects. Now this is like your cows need to be in a positive energy balance to show really good bulling behavior, and also conception. Eggs tend to be better when they've had, well, were in a positive energy balance, when they sort of were ready basically in the ovaries. So it's all here connected to each other, and you get all this information from cows and from the robots back into your computer. Now that's all data, but clearly it's not all about data. You can also look and see what you see. So on the cows, and we talk about cow signals, activity within days, you see cows changing. You see cows changing in what I've got here, a couple of pictures of rumen fill. So this is an emptier rumen, so there's be less fiber in the diet, or the cows haven't been keen to eat. This is sort of an ideal rumen fill. Chewing cut, yes, the cows want to be lying down and chew about sort of 50 to maximum 70 chews on a cut. And dung consistency, which I think your nutritionists on tonight will really look at that all the time. Some do a bit of sieving of the dung, and you might see some corns or things in there still. And in the sort of more extreme situations, you might see cut balls, these sort of firmish sort of balls left in the feed troughs or at the feed pens or in the cubicles. And cows, when things go on, obviously you get this body condition score change. So loss in body condition of more than half a score. You get the coat looking a bit different when either cows are under the weather or there might be mineral problems going on, or you get lameness, which I sort of tipped on earlier. It's like the subclinical acidosis can give sort of a white line disease, a tenderness on the feet. So with robotic milking and roughage intakes and feeding interval are all crucial. So this is what we kind of came to, the pH of the cows. There, it stays stable if we get more meals a day. Here they need 6 meals in this research project, the more the better really, with your cake, that is. And this is like a traditional parlor herd, 2 meals a day. They do get really big pH changes. Now the general feed settings, we need to check them regularly. So clearly when there's diet changes at hand, so forage changes, cake changes, you might decide to go to a different type of cake, or you might want to add another cake type to your robot. You think that's a good idea, which can be. Then obviously get in touch and let's sit around the table as a team, or nowadays just chat over the Zoom basically. But also get in touch when there's a cow behavioral changes. So there's more or less visits to the robots. Something's not quite as you want it to be. Milk yield differs from what you expect, or you see body condition changes and dung consistency changes. So there is some sort of metabolic nutritional problem going on. In the first case, we're talking about preventative action. So you actually make the plan when you know there's going to be changes. And the other one is the one you don't really want to get into, but everybody gets to sometimes, is the reactive action. How do we set up feed tables? We're not going to dig on too deep into this, but a rule of thumb is probably quite good for everybody to know. And it really is, you're looking at the average yield of the herd. And so I've taken here sort of a 30 kilo average. And then what we want to have at the feed fence is about 23 kilo plus maintenance. So a 7 kilo difference. That gives enough of an interest of the cows to go and visit the robots, but you're not too dependent on feeding lots of cake in the robots. So this is almost an optimal if you can get to that. So that's why we're looking at that rule of thumb. If you're assessing a diet coming on the farm or of yourself, just note what the current herd performance is, note what diet there is outside at the fence, and note the number of cake feeds that are available, and if there's any out of partner feeders. Oh, what's happened here? Sorry about that graph, that's slightly overlapping the other one. But realistically, this is graph 52, a lactation curve. And we say, okay, let's say this herd is peaking at sort of 40 days on about 45 kilos, and then obviously cows drop a little bit, but they're doing a decent yield still by sort of drying off. So let's say a feed table for the milking cows in this herd. As we said, 30 kilo herd, we're going to have 23 kilos at the fence. That means that we still want to give any cow at least 2 kilos of cake in the robot. This is to make sure that the cow is still interested to go to the robot, even if she gives less than 23 kilos. There's probably not that many cows in the herd that do less than 23 kilos. Then we build up, we give them extra cake as they need it because they are yielding more milk. So we build up to about 8 kilos of cake maximum. This is the Lely sort of standard. And that would make about 39 kilos of milk there. I know we sort of give that extra 2 kilos at the lower end cows. Now you marry up the sort of the lead periods. So we say about 3 kilos after calving, not too much more. And then we steadily bring that up. And yes, at the peak yield, 40 days here, they are on their 8 kilos. And then they go to yields at about 60 days. They've managed to get their peak. They are sort of cycling. And then we just sort of say, okay, we feed to yield. Close to drying off, we bring them down to 1 kilo. And just to help down the drying off process, really, not to stimulate the yield by giving them cake, just to bring them down a little bit. So that's your standard feed table. There is a few other options. So you can actually feed up to 8 cake feeds in the robot and a liquid feed. I think the liquid feed the last year or two have become really popular. So that's your propylene glycol type feed mostly. A little bit of extra energy tends to be given in early lactation. So that's a possibility. The other options people look at is, I'm actually going to split my cakes. I'm going to get an energy cake and a protein cake, or correction feed. And if we're talking feeding for profits, this is one thing to look at as well. Because you could say, actually, all my cows need a bit of this cake. So the whole herd gets about 3 kilos or 2 kilos, whatever they're doing. And I'm only topping up the high yielding cows or the fresh cows with the energy cake, which is maybe the more expensive cake. So that is an option to look at. Other farms happen to have, generally that's the farms that produce their own straights or some sort of coarse mix or some things, and they can make a mix. They can feed both a cake and the straights in the robot as well. So these are all options that are available to everyone. If you want to set this up, just have a chat with us, because that would be most easiest to explain everything. And this is another one. So, okay, this is quite common. I don't know about any other areas in the UK particularly, but in the Southwest, we tend to like feeding cake. So, yes, Lely recommends a maximum of 8 kilo cake per day via the robot. A lot of our farms probably come out of a parlour having fed cows at least 10, 12, 15, 16 kilos of cake a day. So yes, okay, fair enough. But the robot is more, yeah, we want to feed 8 kilos maximum. Why is this? Well, 3 kilos of milking means that a cow can eat about 9 kilos. Now this is your cow that does 3 milking, so you're, let's say, 30 kilo cow. Yeah. It's quite difficult to get more cake into cows because you need more milkings. So to get 12 kilos of cake in a cow, she needs to come 4 times a day, and she also needs to have enough time to eat those 3 kilos of milking. So there is a good reason why we find out that when you feed 8 kilos, you don't have rest feed. So all the feed you want to give to cows is given. If you start going over, you tend to have cows, not all, but a lot of cows end up with rest feed. So there's feed allocated to them that they won't actually eat because they're either too fast milking, too short in the robot, or they don't have the number of milkings. So what is the solution for that? Well, you can either put extra concentrates at the diet at the feed fence. And this is what we're talking about, because realistically, those farms that want to feed more tend to have more than 7 kilos difference at the feed fence. So if we're talking back to that 30 kilo herd, those herds might actually feed about maybe for not 23 but 20 kilos or maybe even 15 kilos at the feed fence. So they need to top up with more cake. The solution is to put more cake or more concentrate type feed at the feed fence, because they can and they shouldn't lose robot visits. The other solution is they say, well, actually, I don't want to make my fence diet, you know, of a higher quality in a way. I just want to be simple. I'm on sort of, let's say, a grass-based silage based feeding system. Well, then what you do is get an out-of-parlour feeder, the Cosmix. You can top up the cows outside of the robot, so you're not impairing robot time. So the robot can keep milking. You don't need priority feeding. And also the cows, again, can go to the Cosmix 10 times a day if they want to and just get a little bit of cake. So again, we keep the rumen stable. You get little and often feeds. So this is really suited to those farms. Now you might be glad I'm nearly at the end. Summary is, look at the basics, regularly check your feed settings with your advisors, discuss any concerns about feeding and feed settings, don't hesitate to call us up. And also if you want to change anything or you want to discuss the options for extra feeds or Cosmix feeds, feel free to ask and we'll set it up with you. Now, once you're settled into the basics of feeding, consider what your goals are. What is the next step? And what is most important to me? Do I want to feed for yields? I want to get to 40 kilos average. Do I want to feed for silage? I want loads of fat and protein. Do I want to feed for improved health? Now, generally, everybody wants to have good, healthy cows. But if there's a particular issue you want to have a look at. Do I want to feed for profit? And that's where Bas will come in, because we got another module which really focuses on profit. Now, I'm going to also ask Bas if there was any questions that need answering.
There were no questions in the chat, Wendy, so thank you for your presentation.
Okay, that's good. I need to find Bas now some. Oh, there you are. Well, Bas, I'll hand it over to you then.
Okay, thank you. So good evening, everybody. Hope everybody is well and safe at the moment. And if you can confirm, Wendy, that you can see my screen. Yeah, thank you very much. Yeah, thank you all for joining, and it's good to see that we got a lot of people from all over the place joining us. Also welcome to people from Ireland and Northern Ireland. Tonight, yeah, we are kind of like talking about feeding and feeding for profit. What we have seen is that people are feeding concentrates to the cows. Some feed a lot, some feed a little, and it's just kind of in a way what is the best for the cow, but also what is the best for the farmer and the health of the cow. So first of all, kind of like who am I? I'm Bas van Zanten. I'm here at Lady Center Devon and Cornwall, and I'm doing their aftercare, farm management support, and also help out with center development to bring our center to the next level, customers to the next level, and make sure that people get as much as they can from their investment with Lely. Before that, I used to work for Lely Atlantic, which was kind of the support organization for the UK and Ireland to support all our Lely centers. And prior to that one, I have worked for ADAS and also for the dairy group as an advisor to advise people on breeding, feeding, milking technique, and also robotic milking. As kind of farm management support, we have a vision, which is in line with the Lely vision of profitable, enjoyable, sustainable, and future in farming. The FMS, or the farm management support vision, is to optimize the profitability, enjoyability, sustainability of your farm, but also at your choice. So it is your choice to kind of to decide what kind of like you want from us. We're here to help. We're trying to get the best out of your system to make sure that everything is kind of like as it should be. So my part is to do with dynamic feeding, and it has been a model that has been introduced by Lely since 2009. But now also with us changing from the Time for Cows software program to Lely Horizon, it will be kind of renamed as Concentrate Optimizer to make sure that the cow has the optimized amount of concentrate for her needs. First of all, I want to give you a little bit of background of like what we as Lely have been achieving in the UK. And for 2020, the average yield per cow per day has been 30.5 kilos every single day in the year 2020. 2020 for everybody probably has been challenging because we have been gone to 2 lockdowns. First lockdown was a very hard one, especially for farmers up country, where actually they were told by the milk buyer to reduce milk. And what they done is to feed less concentrates. What also some of these farmers actually realized was that they fed less and they were getting the same amount of milk or more milk. And that's probably also where probably the Concentrate Optimizer has a place to actually say from, hey, are we actually maybe trying too hard to get milk out of our cows? To also give you an idea what the highest yield per cow was, and it is based on all the cows milked on the milking robot. One of our customers achieved 46.6 kilos of milk every single day for the year 2020. And based on the yield per robot, we also had a farmer achieving 2,628 kilos every single day. The question then is, with these high yields, is it profitable? Am I kind of like making the most money by achieving those yields? Or in a way, probably could say, am I buying yield? Also, what we know kind of like as a Lely center here in Devon and Cornwall is that kind of roughly the Lely average concentrates fat per kilo of milk is hovering around the 23 kilos or 0.23 per kilo of milk. As our center, we are running slightly higher. There can be several reasons for it. We have kind of quite a few out-of-color feeders on our farms, which also is measured through the Lely system. In other areas, there might be a lot more partially mixed diet at the feed fence or TMR fat at the feed fence, which reduces the amount of concentrate fed through a Lely system. Hence, we might be higher. But as we are higher, is there room for improvement? Because our average yield is also about 30.5 kilos of milk, so in line with the UK average. Hence, is there a place for us to reduce it? And one thing, the most important thing probably of every system is the feeding and the feeding factors. And the thing is with feeding, there's quite a lot of areas that are kind of like influenced. First of all, we have to sample all our feeds, and then we calculate the ration. After we've been feeding the ration, we feed that ration to the cows, and we are expecting them to eat that amount. Also, then they kind of like have to eat the ration, digest the ration, and we supplement with concentrates to balance the ration or to top up for a higher yielding cows. Feed fend management, very important, because if the feed is there, but we are not pushing it in, cows can't reach it and are not having the intakes. Hence, it's very important that have fresh feed available to the cows 24 hours a day for every cow, every day, 365 days a year. Quality of roughage is also very important. Is it clean? Is it free of mold? Is it not heating up? To assure that we get good intakes and that the cows also are getting the right amounts out of it. And as Wendy said, also water. Very important to have clean water, but also enough water available to your cows to use all the milk. Because milk, a big proportion of it is liquid. So as Wendy also said, we are in a way feeding the rumen. We're feeding the rumen bugs. We want to make sure that we have a balanced rumen with a stable pH, so that we're not upsetting the rumen bugs and that they can make the full amount of nutrients out of what we put into them. That the rumen contracts rightly, stimulated by enough fiber in the diet, and kind of like have a good flow through the rumen so that everything is taken out of the goods before it comes out of the backside of the cow. As Mandy also mentioned, feeding multiple times per day kind of gives a more stable rumen. The rumen pH is not as much fluctuating, and we have less chance of getting rumen acidosis or upsets on the cows. Because it's all to do with feed efficiency. We're putting feed into our cows. We want to make sure that they take as much as possible out of these kind of diets we feed them to produce the meat, produce the milk, and also have manure, which quite often is seen as a waste. Nutrients are very important also for the fields and to get the balance right at the fields. And also it's with feeding little and often. What we want to try to achieve is in a way stay within the green area of the cycle. Oh, sorry, I went one too quick. So we feed in rapidly fermented carbohydrates, i.e. concentrates. We see an increase in free fatty acids. We see the bacteria grow and activate, and we see a drop in pH. As long as we kind of can stay within the green area, the rumen will stay stable. There won't be any upsets. If we get cows to slug feed, which can happen if we feed once a day, or also sometimes if we feed lots of concentrates in a short period, could see the kind of the rumen pH going more into the orange amber area, where the rumen pH is below 5.8. where then we see a reduction in bacterial growth and also enzyme activity will get reduced. It's then still important that we don't have the cow there in too long a period. In very extreme cases, when the rumen pH even drops below 5.5, we will have acute ruminal acidosis. It's kind of like quite upsetting for the cow, which can also result in death. So it is very important to have enough forage intake, enough fiber in the diet, and feed highly easily digestible carbohydrates in small portions during the day. How do we know that the kind of actually we have a bit of a rumen upset or the cows are not really overly happy? It quite often results in a reduction in appetite. We won't see the animals eating as much as they have done before. They also tend to kind of go a little bit off color. We also will see a reduction in chewing their cuts, and farms with rumination collars will be able to kind of like see the change in rumination. And also these days with farms with the eating minutes on the collar, they can also actually see the reduction in appetite. We can also see that probably undigested grain is in the dung. So the goodness that we fed the cow is actually coming out of the end of the cow, which kind of is in a way money not well spent. So we have to kind of make sure that that rumen stays stable and stays kind of like in the right balance. You can also see bubbly foamy dung with gas bubbles, gives another good indication that, hey, these cows are not ruminating well, got a touch of acidosis there, we need to take action to kind of balance this out. We can also see a drop in milk fat, because that's quite often caused also by this kind of upset in the rumen. A drop in milk yield, and also quite often there will be diarrhea. So it is very important to actually keep it all stable. So then kind of the next question is, how are we currently feeding our cows? Where do we base it on? And most farmers, we base it on the average. We look at the average yield of the cows and we try to feed to the average cow. So for instance, as Wendy mentioned earlier, we're feeding for 23 kilos if we have a 30 kilo average at the feed fence. And every cow producing more than 23 kilos will be rewarded more concentrates based on their yield. It's kind of one of those things that we always have done, and we never kind of look back from there. And it always works very well for most farmers. But then we have also things that, in this case, we have shortage of feed space. Not enough feed space will mean the dominant cow will eat most of it. And the cow that needs the most actually is having the leftovers and actually is not producing well, it's not in a good condition, and we will have kind of like struggles with her. The dominant one will be in good condition, she looked after herself, and hopefully also will give enough milk for the farmer to make it pay. We also, in a way, the one that does the most milk gets the most feed. The one that is not doing as well is getting less. Is that the right way? It's hard to tell because the cows won't talk to us. Or should we be feeding them the other way around? The one that does the best doesn't eat as much because it's already doing well. And the one that's not doing as well, we should stimulate more to give her more. And that's kind of like, it's where probably concentrate optimizer or DLM feeding, it's actually coming in. It actually is looking at economical, most optimal milk yield, not maximum milk yield. It is looking at the individual cow and her response to the concentrate we give. If she gives a positive response, she will get more concentrates. If the concentrates and the milk price is kind of like balancing out, then the system has found its kind of spot. And that's what it is doing every single day. It's calculating for the farmer what the cow will get tomorrow to make sure that she's not A, overfed or not B, underfed. It's based in a way on the cost of your concentrates, the cost of your feed diet at the feed fence, and also your profit, milk price, fat price, and protein price, if you are getting paid for fat and protein. What it then will do is put the individual optimization model in place and does a calculation. It's not a straightforward calculation. It's also working with models, looking at cow behavior, making sure that that cow is all right, not that actually we are kind of bringing her yield down or losing condition to kind of like to that effect. The model itself is being designed by Lely, but also kind of in cooperation with the animal science group in Wageningen University there, to actually look at where are we? Are we looking at a linear module, or where is kind of like the optimum level for each cow? Where can we decrease the loss? So not actually feeding too much to a cow that is not producing, or where can we increase by actually giving extra concentrates to the cows that actually need the concentrates and actually have a positive response to it. It can be kind of probably a bit compared with fertilizer in some cases. There will be an optimum point. Where that will be depends on each individual cow. Same as with fertilizer, at some stage, you can put more fertilizer on, but you won't get any more production from your fields. There will be an optimum point. If you feed too much, it actually can also be a negative effect, because then the cow might go into an acidotic stage, the rumen is out of balance, she still will eat the concentrates, but is not producing the milk, is not producing you the profit. So it is kind of quite difficult to tell you where it is for each individual cow. As an example, on this slide, you can see that kind of on the left-hand side here is the amount of concentrates. On the bottom one is the amount of milk, and every dot is an individual cow. So you can see that cows with similar yields are having different feed rates of concentrates. And that's where kind of the DLM concentrate optimizer actually is kicking in. And it's a different way of looking at feeding. And that's kind of is always quite hard to understand and also work with. So we actually have some examples or have experienced ourselves where it is. So there's in a way 3 ways we can feed our cows. We can do fixed feeding. We can decide what the cow gets regardless of yield, or what a group of cows get regardless of yield, or what the whole herd is getting regardless of yield. As a farmer, we can fix the cow on 5 kilos of concentrates and leave her on 5 kilos of concentrates. Do the whole herd or a whole group. It's what we decide those cows need. And that's one thing we probably see in some of the Southern Island farms where people are grazing. Cows are block calves, so they're all roughly the same stage of lactation. That actually people just use a fixed feeding thing. They look at the grass quality in the field and they fix the amount of concentrates they're getting. The other way is by using the feed table. Wendy showed earlier, a feed table is there. That is a static calculation and it's based on the herd average. And then if the cow is giving more and more milk, she will get kind of more concentrates based on a linear static calculation. The third option is using the concentrate optimizer. It will be an individual calculation and optimization for individual cows based on their milk, based on their fat, protein, and how they react to the extra additional concentrate we give or to the concentrate we have taken away. We follow kind of like the normal way we have always been feeding the cows is we have a minimum amount of concentrates, which in this case is like here the 2 kilo line, and we got a maximum amount of concentrate cow. From over here, roughly, you would say it's 20, 21 kilos of milk. If the cow gives more milk, then linearly, she will go up in concentrate. Still here, she hit the top amount and stays at the top amount. If we will switch on the concentrate optimizer, then kind of like cows will be everywhere. Kind of they can be kind of on 2 kilos, they can be on 8 kilos, 50 kilo cow on 2, 3 kilos of cake, but also a 50 kilo cow on 8 kilos of cake. Also the other way around, we can have a 25 kilo cow on 8 kilos. It's just how they react to the kind of the concentrates we feed them, which is then optimized for individual animal. So what we have seen is there's a clear effect of improved feed efficiency. From so far, most farms we have switched on, we have actually seen that kind of the feed rate has been coming down and milk yield have stayed around the same amount of level, sometimes slightly down, sometimes slightly up. And I have to say to you, we also have people that have switched it off. Kind of, it is possible kind of to switch it on and switch off whenever you like. We had one farmer that was not really kind of comfortable that the milk yield was going down in the first week. So after 1 week, we have switched it off and he put him back again on his normal feed table. Another farmer said, I can see all the benefits of the system. He said it has been going quite well, but as I'm kind of now have to produce a quota for next year's milk production, I'm quite happy to feed more concentrates to my cows to actually get the yield so that I got a bigger A quota, which affects his milk price. So it is possible to actually switch it on and switch it off during the year if a farmer wanted to, kind of to go to its individual circumstances. Also, what we have seen so far is no adverse effect on health and reproduction. As said earlier, the module has been designed in 2009. It has been very popular in France, where a lot of farmers have been using it and still using it. And we also only kind of probably recently started to use it here in the UK. Main reason for that, it's probably the same as probably most people at the moment into the meeting today, is we were not fully convinced that actually it will work by feeding less concentrate and making more money. Because we always feel like if we feed less, milk will drop, income will be down, and we're not going to kind of make any money. So we have kind of slowly introduced it on a few farms, probably now about like a year and a half ago. After that, kind of like when I was still working for Lely Atlantic, I kind of like went to Northern Ireland and have there done a meeting similar as today to actually introduce it to farmers there. And currently, I believe there's over 15 farms there currently using the system and also kind of giving us good feedback on how well they get on with it. So it is kind of like still kind of early days in some areas. Other areas we have been using it a longer time. And in a minute, I will go through a few examples with you to show what we have seen so far. Also still kind of like we still tell in a way the robot what the feed levels we do. So we give it a minimum amount of concentrate, which we normally set at 2 kilos, but also we say a maximum amount of concentrate that the robot will work in between depending on the cow. What we have seen is that farms that are running on the DLM module or concentrate optimizer are running in the robot around 0.19 kilos of concentrate per kilo of milk, which have been in average 5 to 7 kilos less, 0.05 less than for cows, and for heifers slightly less than before they went kind of on dynamic milking. What we also have seen is actually a more stable body weight, because as cows were not pushed as hard, they didn't lose as much body weight, and actually the negative energy balance early lactation was also kind of like not actually as obvious. And throughout, also the condition of these cows has stayed quite well. And there's one thing we're looking now at is also with farms that have a weigh floor to actually see if that's also kind of like is kind of like happening. But one thing we have to realize, there are different farms. We have farm differences related to feed management. So what will work for your neighbor probably won't work as well for you. Hence, we also decided we need to give these farmers that are happy to try the system support to make sure that we know what's happening. We can learn at the same time as the farmer is learning to make sure that it is a success for the farmer. Also, the ration at the feed fence need to be in a way providing sufficient energy and protein for the cows. It is kind of hard if we can't balance it out at the feed fence to balance it, especially if we start taking concentrates away. That's why sometimes in farms with 2 concentrate types, we can use one concentrate to balance the diet and use the other concentrate on a dynamic feeding module. Also, what we will see is cows compensate for concentrates reduction. And most of the time, they'll eat more at the feed fence. And that's actually a very good one, because that's why we say, hey, we need to have feed available at the feed fence. It has to be pushed in for these cows to actually have the extra intake. What we also actually seen on most farms is actually, yes, intakes will go up, but not as much as we expected. So it is kind of like still the cow probably still will get more out of what we put in. And we have seen eating minutes go up and rumination go up, which then kind of explains why also kind of, yes, probably the cow is feeling a bit happier and getting more out of what we have put in. With the concentrate optimizer also, it will be the production concentrate that we need to kind of optimize. We can't really do the balance one, because if we are trying to up and down the balance concentrate, it actually then will unbalance the diet for the cows. So now I would like to kind of go for you to an example, and kind of like as an example, what I've done is I took probably the first farm we started with the experiment to actually kind of see what's going to happen. And on this farm, we started on the 22nd of August, 2019. So we have been going kind of now like for like nearly a year and a half with the concentrate optimizer. Also, what we done there is we done like a zero measurement. And what we done is we took the week before we started as our zero measurement. So the week before we switched it on, the average yield was 34.76 kilos of milk, feeding 24.8 kilos per 100 kilos of milk, or 0.248 as a starting point. What the concentrate optimizer done, in week 1, we lost a minimal amount of milk. Well, we already lost kind of like 2.7 kilos of 0.027 of concentrate fat per kilo of milk. After 12 weeks, we lost a little bit more milk, but we were already down to 0.16 kilo of milk fat. So concentrate fat was way down. Yield was half a kilo down after 12 weeks of the experiment. By the way, this is a 3-robot farm where we had 3 robots milking. And overall, kind of like what we saw is he was saving at that stage 430 kilos of concentrates every single day. And he lost just over half a kilo of milk. To kind of give you a little bit more of the background figures. So he was before producing around the 4,900 kilos of milk every single day. He was feeding just over 1,200 kilos of concentrate every single day. And he had around 148 cows in milk before we started with this concentrate optimizer. Then kind of going 12 weeks later, we're still probably producing around 4,800, 4,900 kilos of milk. We were feeding just over 750 kilos of concentrates, and still with roughly 146, 147 cows in milk, producing similar amount of milk, but feeding quite a lot of less concentrate. To give you a little bit more, and I'm very sorry it's a little bit small, but this is then February 2020, so like 6 months in, feeding about the 5,200 kilos of milk, doing about the 36, 37 kilos of milk. So yield actually went a bit up, and actually only feeding just under 700 kilos of concentrates. Still kind of like the concentrate optimizer is optimizing the herd, reducing the concentrates, and actually kind of like making sure that these cows are happy. Now, as this farm has been going for quite a while, we also actually have report 52, so the lactation analysis, to actually see what actually is happening to these cows. So we can still see that kind of like we're building up the concentrates as normal. And the concentrate optimizer, we always want to kick in around the 30 days after calving. Why roughly 30 days? Because at that stage, we're still in the upward curve. Yield is still improving. So any bit of concentrate we will give that cow, we hope we get a response in milk. So that's why kind of like 30 days, we're still on the up. We still kind of have room to go up with concentrates. But what we actually see here is the system already decide that it is too much concentrates, and it starts already taking concentrates away. This is just the cow curve, by the way, but still cows are peaking at 54 kilos average at peak lactation and gradually go down. We see a lot flatter lactation curve, and they're still kind of like at the 305 days, still doing about 36 to 37 kilos of milk. As we can see, concentrates are only kind of like slowly going down over time. Here kind of is like the 30 days, and kind of like still the cows are going up to here about 54. If I kind of like look at the heifer one, we see, as we expect, a flat heifer lactation curve, peaking around the 34, 35 kilos of milk. And also with the heifers, we kind of see that at the 30 days, concentrates is not kind of going up much more and levels out towards the end of the lactation. As a farmer, we also kind of got a report where we actually can see where the cows are at what stage. So over here, we can see up to kind of like 30 days from these cows are not kind of optimized. They're just fed according to the standard feed table. We built them up to kind of like to the level we want them to. And then here at 30 days, we actually see the cow kind of like it kicks in, DLM kicks in. These days, we also will have on the slide the concentrate price as per cow and also the milk price per cow as an income. So there is more now as margin also showing for. Now, as you can see, we have a lot of down arrows. So actually the system is saying these cows are getting too much concentrates, so we're taking it away. Cows without an arrow are the ones that stay the same, but also we see some cows where actually the arrow goes up. So actually the system says, hey, we drop you too far, I'll put you back up again. Now what I've done, I highlighted 3 cows on this form. As before, when I done this meeting in Northern Ireland, it was all kind of like quite early, quite new. So we didn't have actually more information on these cows. Now kind of as we are kind of like a lot later than we introduced over there, we actually know a little bit more about these cows. So I highlighted cow 722. At that stage, 36 days calved, doing 41.9 kilos of milk on 8.83 kilos of concentrates. I also highlighted cow 1202. At that stage, 54 days calved, 58 kilo average, being fed 7.66 kilograms, but DLM or concentrate optimizer is saying that is too much, I'm dropping you down. And I also highlighted cow 129, 58 days calved, doing 65.5 kilos of milk on 7.74 kilos of concentrates, and actually the system said she is at the right level at that stage. So here we got kind of like the cow card of cow 722, and I highlighted kind of like she has been on the farm a little bit longer there. So as a heifer, she done 12,900 kilos of milk, at being fed 3.7 ton of concentrates. As a second calver, 17,400 milk with nearly 4.5 ton of concentrates. Then a lactation of 17.5 with 3.5 ton of concentrate. And then her DLM or concentrate optimizer lactation, as she has been all the way on there, she actually did 12,300 with 1.8 ton of concentrates. So massive reduction compared with her other kind of like lactations. Current lactation, as she calved again, and as you can see, from like nearly spot on 365 days, or slightly earlier, she calved again. And so far, like 99 days calved, on average doing 62.9 kilos of milk. Which actually currently, so I done this a couple of days ago, she's actually doing 66 kilo average at 8.8 kilos of concentrates, and she's just kind of around 100 days calved. Also, as you can see, she's actually 9 days inseminated. So kind of she's doing pretty well for herself on not as much concentrates, because at the moment predicted to do nearly 17,000 in 305 days. The next cow was 1202. And as we can see there, kind of she done 17,600 on just short of 1.9 ton of concentrates. Kind of, and currently 46 days calved and an average of 49.1 kilo of milk. And currently doing 54 kilos of milk at 9.4 kilos of concentrate. Now, kind of the last cow was doing 65.5 kilos of concentrates. And kind of like, as we can see here, she actually still is doing the same lactation. So 23,000 kilos of milk, at the moment just short of 2.6 ton of concentrates fed for that lactation. Still doing 38 kilo average at 3.3 kilos of concentrates a day. One probably thing is she's down as keep open, so actually she won't do another kind of lactation on the farm anymore. But still a lot of milk produced with actually not a lot of concentrates fed. So one way or the other, concentrate optimizer is working. Even for these high yielding cows, it is giving a good effect. And then also, what actually did the farmer say? Because he's been going now for a long time with it. And he says his fresh cows and heifers are doing much, much better than before. He started with the concentrate optimizer. Kind of challenges that he used to have with his cows have gone away. It's a lot easier managing its cows, a lot easier looking after its cows. Also, what he's saying, and agreed to himself, he was overfeeding kind of his late lactation cow, which was kind of like quite problematic, probably not getting back in the right condition score when he dried them off. Also kind of feeding significantly less, because he went from like over 1,200 kilos a day to just under 700 kilos a day of concentrates. And he's getting similar results, but actually also now we see that actually he's getting better results. His fat and protein has improved, so his milk price also has improved. And more importantly, also in his case, his calving interval went from 420 days to now 387 days. And also cows are holding better. The service per conception from 2.8 growth per conception to 2.15, and also using less hormones. So in his case, he done pretty well out of it. He is really kind of convinced, and he's still using the system as we speak, and he will continue using the system. So next thing I want to share with you is actually more like what the results we are getting here in Devon and Cornwall. And one thing that we have always struggled with is how do we compare? What do we compare? Because we're drying cows off, we're calving cows in. We have a month with a few more cows calving. We have a month with a few less cows calving, changes in silages. It's all kind of like influences. How can we monitor? So what I've done is I look at the yield per cow. I look at the amount of concentrates we feed per cow. What feed rate we feed per kilo of milk over the herd. Probably the total herd margin. Also margin per cow and also margin per kilo. I look at week 0, which in a way is the week before we start switching concentrate optimizer on. But I also look at month 0. It actually is the month before we switch it on, just to kind of get all the kind of like the awkward things out of it, to actually get a better picture of what's happening. But then also what I look at is the average. So the average, where are we now compared from the day we started till today, but also in which week we are and what's happening in that week to see where we are. So first farm I got here, currently 5 weeks on the concentrate optimizer. Week 0, we've done 28.3 kilos. The month before 29.2, so the week before was not as good as the month, from only feeding silage at the feed fence. So we're feeding in the robot and in the outer parlor feeder, the Lady Cosmics. And on average, we were feeding just over 10 kilos of concentrate per cow per day at a feed rate of 0.35 and 0.367. Daily income, that's only based on milk sold minus concentrated fat in the robot, because we don't know kind of like always how much he will feed at the feed fence. 1,560 pounds per day. Margin per cow, £6.37 and £6.67, and a margin per litre between the 22.5 and 23p per kilo. So as I said, going for 5 weeks at the moment, and based kind of like on the average, yield is the same as the week before, lower than the month. We're feeding at the moment over the average of the 5 weeks, 9 kilo average. So we lost just over 1.4 kilos of concentrate per cow per day. Average feed rate, 0.315. Margin, still the same as the month before. Margin per cow, very similar. Margin per litre, slightly higher. For the week, we actually are quite a bit down. We're actually 27.6 kilos, just over 8 kilos, 0.3 feed rate. Margin has come down for the herd. Margin per cow has gone down. Margin per litre slightly gone up. We looked at silage. We looked at anything we could think of to actually why are these cows are not producing. One thing that came out here was that actually we calibrated the feeder, which actually came out that we were underfeeding by 12%. So we need to calibrate regularly, from ideally every load of cake. Maybe this year, I don't know why, but it could be is wheat and barley slightly different. Our pellets of concentrate slightly different in density, that we got this big problem. And since we actually kind of like calibrated the feeders, things are looking a lot better now. And we actually are now kind of seeing a yield lift, and cows are starting to kind of like look better again. So it is very important to calibrate your feeders, even if you're not on kind of like the concentrate optimizer. The next example I got here is like a partially diet fed herd. So doing kind of 34 kilos average, about the 6.5 kilos in the robot, feed rate of 0.19, so very acceptable, actually doing very, very well. Not really much there that we could say is not going right. Yes. Is there a question? No? Okay. So for the average over the 6 weeks, because this farm is going for 6 weeks, we're producing exactly the same amount of milk. We're feeding kind of like 3/4 of a kilo less in the robot, making more money, better margin per cow, better margin per litre. Recent week, we're nearly touching now the 35 kilos of milk, with feeding kind of a kilo less in the robot, kind of not as much kind of margin, but that's because we kind of dried off at the dry off cows. So hence probably also the margin per cow gone up, margin per litre gone up. Next herd is going like for 9 weeks. And again, partly mixed diet, kind of doing about 26.5 kilos of milk, doing very well. Average so far, actually we saw a yield lift, concentrate gone down, margin gone up. So farmer very, very happy. And kind of if we look at week 9, currently is actually doing kind of nearly 29 kilos of milk. And actually it's really working well for him. And that's kind of where we kind of see different farms, different results. Last farm here, kind of also going about 9 weeks, doing about kind of like 31 kilos at the start. And again, kind of feeding forage at the feed fence. Here we started off with feeding silage and a bit of fodder beet. Then kind of like we had a bit of fodder beet, a bit of silage and maize. Now we got a bit of maize, whole crop, and kind of silage. But also what we had is actually, we got to the end of the pit. So the last couple of weeks, we're at the end of the pit. We also had a lot of animals calve, so the robots are also very, very full. So ideally, what we would like is that Lely design something that we can have more hours in a day to actually get all these cows milked within the certain day. But of course we can't. But again, for the average so far over the 9 weeks, still about the 30.5 kilos of milk, about 2 kilos less in the robot, kind of margin looking good, margin per liter looking good, margin per liter looking good. But then the last week, because of changing silages, overstocking the robot, we have a bit more of a challenge on our hands, but we have made kind of changes now, and we are now in the new pit, so there shouldn't be kind of many changes happening, and we actually have seen that the yield started lifting. Also, like with this particular farmer did not feel as comfortable with actually going to concentrate optimizer at 30 days. So what we done there is actually we made a workaround that actually we go to milk optimizer at 60 days. Because the farmer was not happy that kind of like his scratch cows was taking away the concentrates. So as we can see here at 60 days, from feeding 13 kilos of concentrates in the robot, the robot will start taking it away. What the farmer also found was that, hey, it takes the cake away, but still the yield also start dropping, and I'm not too comfortable with it. So what the farmer done at that stage, 11 days after it kicked in, he put the animal on fixed feeding, because he said, no, it's taking it away too quick. The cow is losing too much milk. I'm not happy with this. But what we've seen is the cow is getting more concentrates. The cow is eating all the concentrates, and actually from her yield is going even further down. So what is happening there is probably the cow is coming into the amber orange area, where actually we will see that kind of like the concentrates kind of like is actually kind of like upsetting the rumen pH. Another cow on the same farm, again, kind of like we saw the farmer kind of fix the cow. And what we actually saw there is that actually by adding more concentrates again, the yield of that cow started to slip away and gone down and down further. What we also can see here is actually that at this stage, also the concentrate optimizer kicked in, because it was taking concentrates away. It then realized from, hey, she's dropping too fast, because she went from probably from 36 to 33 to 32, saying from, hey, I need to increase concentrates. But that's also kind of like what the system starts to do, is actually starts to raise the concentrates. So what did the farmers say that so far on our kind of like experiment that we're doing is cows are looking better. They say cows looking better. Advisors that come to the farm say from, hey, the cows are looking in a different condition than I came here last time. The dung consistency has improved. We kind of saw same production result with less cost. Also fat and protein has improved, and heats are stronger. So actually cows are cycling stronger than actually they have seen before. Probably too early days in most cases to say what about fertility, but as we saw in the other example, fertility can improve on some farms, but it's all on the individual. And also cows can be in better condition, not losing as much weight, staying more stable during the lactation. And also kind of like one farmer said, what is there not to like with all the money I save? So he was actually very, very pleased with how the system was working for him. But then also what I want to share with you is kind of like, is the learnings we have so far with the concentrate optimizer. One thing for sure, it's not for everyone. If you are kind of really kind of focused on high yields per cow, and that's what's kind of like, it's what your aim is, and probably concentrate optimizer won't help you with that, because it will probably take the concentrates away and reduces that yield slightly. But we're not sure till we try it. It's also that free time is very important on the robots, that cows can come and visit the robots and that we're not missing milkings or not kind of like running out. But that is also important even if you not have the concentrate optimizer on. Also, calibrate the feeders, as we've seen at the farm, the first farm I showed you there. It's important. Same as kind of like now, if you have not switched it on. And if you haven't kind of calibrated your feeder recently, please tomorrow morning calibrate your feeder and check kind of if it's still dropping the same amount of concentrates for you. Also, when grazing, it's not advised to switch it on, as grazed grass can vary a lot day by day. Concentrate optimizer will be all the time recalculating up, down, up, down. We need a stable diet. We need a flat rate diet there. But then if you are a grazing farm, you can have it on in the winter. Actually feed the cows during the winter with the concentrate optimizer. As soon as you turn them out, we can switch it off. And also when producing a quota, as one of our farmers said that tried it before, he is producing milk for his a quota now, so he has switched it off. But he said as soon as we got that sorted, I'm quite happy to put it back on again and kind of like get the most profitable milk as I can. And also normally a small drop in the first week. So we know it will drop, we know the concentrate will drop, but stay with us. The system will kind of like catch up. And then probably the question that probably everybody's asking is, what's the price? Because there's always probably kind of like a catch somewhere down the line. Good news is there's a free trial. So kind of like it is try before you buy. Try out the module to see if it works for you. And most farmers have seen significant savings in concentrates, which actually kind of paid for the module outright with no problem. It can be switched on and off anytime. So if you're not happy with it, it can be switched off. If you kind of have grazing cows, you can switch it on and off for individual groups or individual cows if needed be. And again, fixed feeding, you can fix cows if you wanted to, if they're not performing as well. One thing I need to say is it will have to be switched on by your own Lely center. It's not something you can switch on yourself. It has to be activated from their time. And then one thing is to make sure it is set up correctly so that you get the full benefit of the system. And also now your Lely center is there to support you. From probably in 2009, the Lely centers were there, but farm management support was very small and little on the ground. And you were not able to get as much support as we can offer you now. And I think the support itself is beneficial to get the most out of it, to actually look at individual cows, look at how your herd is performing on concentrate optimizer, to alter it as we go to get the most benefit out of it. Also, it's no longer available as a separate module. It used to be available in T4C as it currently stands, as a module that you can buy, same as other modules like Cow Visit Optimizer. All the modules now are no longer kind of available as a separate module. It will be all kind of like part of the Horizon new software package, which at the moment is due to be released roughly the second half of 2021. Hopefully a little bit sooner, but we rather have a finished product ready for you than actually start with a product that still needs a bit of updating. The thing will be, it will be integrated as a package, as an advanced package, together with the pre-treatment optimizer, which is a new feature which is coming out with the Horizon package to optimize the pre-treatment of your cows to stimulate milk letdown. It will be partly with the milk interval optimizer, and also it will be together with individual cow advice. So in the past, people say from, hey, I don't want to kind of like keep buying individual bits and pieces. We all kind of going to put it all together as a kind of a good solid package for you as a farmer. Also, charges will change, and the charge will going to be per cow per in milk per month. Currently, the price has not been decided yet and confirmed. So unfortunately, I can't really share that with you yet. But one thing is, it is at the moment, it can be switched on for you tomorrow as a free trial, which kind of like is a good time to probably start looking at it, especially with currently prices of concentrates going up and up and up. And actually kind of like milk price is not really moving as fast at the moment. And all inputs could be even getting more expensive depending on what Brexit is going to bring us. So as a take-home message, you need to feed a balanced diet at the feed fence. Regardless with the concentrate optimizer on or off, the diet needs to be balanced. Also, feed needs to be available 24/7. So cows need to have access to the feed for it to work to its full extent. Also, we need sufficient free time on the robot so that cows
Shush.
also kind of, we need to keep the information up to date. The system asks for your milk price, it asks for the concentrate price, so we have to tell the system what it is. If we ideally, we want to know what the milk price will be tomorrow, so that the system knows, okay, milk price is going up, so I can start feeding a little bit more concentrates to make more profit. Or concentrate price is going up, we have to revisit it, but still have to kind of get the cow moving, get the cow producing properly. Also, regular feed calibration, very important for the system anyway. And the thing is also, it's not all about maximum yield. It's more about like profitable milk and efficient milk production, cow health, keep the cow healthy, get the cow back in calf, get her kind of feeling happy. As I said also before, the concentrate optimizer is not for everyone, but it is there for you to try and see how you get on with it. So who to contact? Devon and Cornwall, in a way, it's Wendy, her email address and her phone number, or myself to talk to you about it, to see where you are at the moment, how we can help you set it up and get you going. For all the farmers and advisors that are not from Devon and Cornwall, we would like you to contact your local Lely Center, which can be found on the Lely website, under lely.com, as your Lely Center. If you are struggling with getting hold of your Lely Center, please either email or ring Wendy or myself, and we will contact the Lely Center on your behalf to actually ask them to give you a call as you're showing interest in this. So that's my part for so far. So what I would suggest now is probably to open some time for questions that you might have. So if you have a question and you would like to unmute yourself, and please do so.
Okay, hi, Bas. I'm just going to go first for a moment while everybody gets to find their microphone, I think.
Yeah, no problem.
Because the chat has been fairly busy.
Okay.
It's obviously a very interesting topic. I mean, I know it's kind of new to everyone really, and we've been sort of trying, work out our ways through it Bas in the last year or so. There is some discussion on how do we work with generally forages being wet and acidic, like they might be in Northern Ireland, I understand, but I'm sure they are here as well because I've seen that. And also forages that keep changing. I mean, you mentioned the grazing, which changes per day, but also, is there a comment you want to make on silages that are acidic, wet, or change a lot?
Or I think in most cases, it's always a challenge when we have not the forage in the pit as we desire. And it's always, if we can balance it and we can kind of like make it less acidic or add kind of supplements to the diet to balance it out or to stabilize the rumen, then kind of like that probably would be the best way for it. Variable forages, it's always a challenge. we can take a sample of the pit today, and we can take another sample on the same day, and we get different results. And it is kind of like, is always, we always will have variation. It's one of these things that probably, if it is getting too variable and we see that the system is not coping with it, that might be then kind of a reason at that stage to say for me that the diet is not stable enough, and I will switch it off till kind of the diet gets more stable. So kind of like, it is not a system that we say, oh, you have to run all the time. If we feel like for me, the system is not coping with it, let's then switch it off.
Okay, I hope that explained that a little bit. I've got a few more questions, but I'll let everybody else sort of pop in, and then I'll catch up with anything that's been left on the list here.
Okay.
So to everybody, if you go to the bottom of your screen or the top of your screen, and there's a microphone button which you can unmute if you want to ask any of us a question. And there was quite a few people that had questions about fertility and health effects.
Yeah.
Which we mentioned on some of the farms there has been, well, we haven't seen any effects. Would you mind sort of, confirming that, or?
That's the thing, kind of like from the results that we're getting, like in France, they've been using it kind of like very shortly after it was launched. They have not seen any kind of negative effects on fertility. The thing there is also the majority there of the farms will feed maize all year round and have a stable diet. And I think that's where kind of like a lot of the things are from, is like we need stability from the feed fence to kind of like to kind of get the best results of it. And kind of like, for instance, the one that has been going over a year and a half here in the UK, his calving index has improved. He's using less semen to get them in calf. He sees kind of like them also pulling better. So there is kind of like benefits there to gain. And as said earlier, also in the presentation, every farm is different, and every farmer probably will see some different gains than others. And that's why I think it's very important as a Lely Center to support the customers we have with the system, to look at these things, to have regular contact moments, to say are you seeing the cows bulling? Are they holding from the inseminations? Are you getting the PD results? To make sure that the system is working for them.